We just want to help. And I think we can do it. We have so many different ways to help and so many ways to feel, to give people hope. And I think that some people need that. Some people need to say, I'm going to fight, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that.
Welcome to Target Cancer Podcast. My name is Dr. Sanjay Juneja. I'm a hematologist and medical oncologist, also known as the Onc Doc on social media. And for October Breast Cancer Awareness Month, I'm super excited to have Douglas Feil, who is the Chief Program Officer for none other than the National Breast Cancer Foundation. Doug, thank you for being here. And I'm very curious, what made you passionate about what you do?
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. That's a great question. I mean, I've been a nonprofit for probably 20 years, and honestly, I started in the arts. I did music in my 20s, and I thought I was going to move to New York area, and I was really trying to pursue that. It didn't work out as well, and I did an arts nonprofit for a long time. And somewhere in the midst of that, my mother was diagnosed with myelofibrosis, which eventually progressed to leukemia. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah. And so I think at that time she was given maybe 2 or 3 years to live, and she ended up going for 13 years.
Wow.
Which was incredible. And you know this from your work, you just never know, we don't have an expiration date, right? Anything can happen. And so she lived a long time. We had a really beautiful moment, but that really gave me the passion and the purpose for what I do, I would say, and I got married, I started having kids. I was like, I got to get serious about my career and what I want to do. And music wasn't really working out, to be very blunt. And I started at the National Breast Cancer Foundation about 15 years ago. And I started out in fundraising and development, and then got a passion for our program.
That's awesome. You said something that I think is so important, and I keep trying to stress to my patients, is you never know, like as far as the expiration date, but even more than that, and that's a very, I think, hard way to hear it, whether it's cancer related or not, right? Like we all have an expiration date. But more than that, it's within cancer and breast cancer, we've learned over the last, couple of years, if not longer, that it is so different. Breast cancer is so much more than just like your hormone receptor status, which even that got turned kind of upside down on what we called negative, for HER2, and is it negative, and now it's not, and all these things. But the point being is every year it's like, well, it's more complicated than we think.
Yep.
And I think, anyone listening, like, please, it's very hard not to go. I can't imagine to go to the statistics. The statistics are basically one without all the crazy new stuff that's come out even in the last year or two, right? And the screening and how exactly something was done on one patient than the other, but also how you respond. It's just, there's so many different ways to break down, which really goes back to that concept of precision. Like, what is it for you, like your cancer, yourself, and how to best manage it? To that same point, there's a lot of, I guess, confusion too. So I've heard things about, one, and just take a stab at the first one that you may be able to speak on, or want to speak on most eagerly. One, are we doing too many mammograms, right? Does some of this DCIS, so the stage 0 ductal carcinoma in situ, are we just basically, do our bodies kind of actually, they would have taken care of it, right, if we didn't get the lumpectomy?
Well, and I was even going to ask you, I've seen some of your podcasts, and you're a doctor, so I kind of want to, I'm not a doctor. I've never seen patients. So even though I'm in this industry and I'm trying to raise support to help patients, I'm not a doctor. So I kind of like to, I don't want to flip the podcast on you, but I do want to hear your opinion. Absolutely. I mean, I've even heard some on our medical advisory board. We have a wonderful medical advisory board, including Lily Shockney from Johns Hopkins. And I remember talking to her years ago, and she even mentioned about DCIS, maybe even not being labeled as cancer at all. When we do these cancer registries, that's not on there. And so I don't know, have we come to that place yet? I mean, from your view?
No, it's definitely a topic of discussion. I think it brings an important point on evidence-based, right? So it's people like, yeah, but what does that mean? But if we're learning this, then why that? And it really just goes back to the same thing. I mean, we used to do like big mastectomies on everyone, right? And go into the muscle tissue. And then we're like, do we need that? Do we need this? Can we get away with a piece, but then do radiation? The same thing happens here, where it's hard not to do more, right? Just in the same way that we used to have these very kind of, graphic surgeries until we learned by the evidence that we can do less. So like better safe than sorry, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that we're like looking into, is do they remit? Because we beat cancers all the time, right? Or pre-cancers, our bodies and our immune systems take care of that. So it's a good question, and I think it's worth talking to, an oncologist about, or reading about if it's from the right sources. Another, thing to that point that I was excited about is that IV contrast we've used forever, right? Like in a lot of our studies, it was finally approved to be given as part of mammograms, for example. So now kind of all this distress that goes with, an abnormal lesion, biopsy, ultrasound, MRI, contrast allows you to see features about cancers that may be either, more in line with cancer or not, right? Like, do they recruit a lot of blood supply? What is the echo texture? Like, is it the same, on that ultrasound or not when you get that mammogram to see if it looks more variegated? So that I think will hopefully improve a lot of things. Is that something y'all are doing or know how that's being executed kind of in the workflow? Because when you have something built, right, it's like mammograms, ultrasounds, MRIs. Now the contrast comes in, and I got a lot of questions on is it helpful? Is it not? Where do y'all help? Have you seen that like kind of take place in the community?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the main thing, and I'm not sure if you know all that we do, but our biggest program is we fund screenings, diagnostic, biopsy tests for uninsured women across the country. Now, obviously, there's states where the insurance coverage is excellent. Connecticut's one. I lived in Connecticut for a while. I was on the state insurance at one point, and so I think there's states where there's coverage, there's states where there's not. I won't list them all, but I'll say Texas because I'm in Texas right now. And I think in those states, our funding, that's what I love about NBCF. We're very flexible with our funding. So if we get a call from a doctor and they say, we need to do something else, we need to look at this differently with contrast, for example, if they emailed us and said, I know your funding says you fund this, this, and this, but would you fund this? We would say yes, because we want to do everything that we can to help the patient. It's not just being more precise. It's also, there's so many things, and I've seen this even on your podcast, eliminating fear and stress. If you can be more precise, you can eliminate fear for the patient, right? And relieve stress. Then, what does that do?
Right.
Does that take the toll that takes on the body?
Yeah. And the fact that, like, at the end of the day, there's nothing worse than saying, my wife or my daughter or my husband, for that matter, could have a different outcome if we could afford this, or if only we could afford this, or if only, we had the ability to get it sooner. And those are things that are really invaluable, whether the outcome would have been different or not. No, psychologically and emotionally, that has downstream dividends on several people, right, including the patient. So that's very interesting that basically can a patient as well just be able to get that aid? So say the MRI is appropriate, but they're unable to pay for it based on their, insurance policy or no insurance. Are those scenarios where, somebody doesn't have to basically just accept that they will not get the investigation they need and be able to come to NBCF to get assistance? Yeah,
well, we do partner with specific hospitals in countries, in states, and communities across the country. So we're not everywhere. Unfortunately, if we had however many tens of hundreds of millions of dollars, we would be. But right now, we need to grow. We're in all 50 states, but we're in very targeted areas that we know we can reach the most amount of people, but we're not everywhere. So an example, I grew up in the panhandle of Texas, which is that little top part of Texas. It's like the top part of Texas, not very populated. My town had 7,000. I always tell people I was 12th in my class, and then I tell them, comma, out of 26. So I wasn't a doctor, Sanjay. But so I think no, individual patients, if they reach out to us, we're going to do everything that we can. We have a whole mechanism and a navigation system to do that for sure. But our funding goes to specific hospitals. So if you're in that hospital, say MD Anderson, where we have a partnership there, and the doctor emails us and says this patient doesn't have funding for this, or this, can we use your grant funds? Yes. The answer is yes. Anything that we can do to remove the barrier of getting to that diagnosis, from suspicious finding to a diagnosis, we're going to do it. I wish that we could do it if we had probably $200 million every year. We could do it probably for everyone. But as you know, this is a cost.
We pardon this interruption real quick. If you're enjoying this podcast or find it valuable for what we discuss and the education and how people see and think about cancer in general, we would very much appreciate a like, subscribe, and especially a share so we can bring that information as maximally and broadly as possible. Thank you so much for listening.
I'm a big kind of enthusiast, I guess, to learn what value AI and AI systems are able to bring, possibly related to cost, but even through, the number of necessary steps and possibly kind of making it more concentrated or necessary. Do you have any knowledge or are y'all looking at those kind of things that may help these communities be able to do things, I guess, either quicker or better or more affordably?
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at AI in all aspects of our operations, quite frankly. But I will say this, being in a nonprofit, you attract people who are very warm. We even do personality tests on our staff and our volunteers. It's people who want to give back. They want to volunteer. It's the people that volunteer. It's the people who have these huge hearts. So how do I say this? It's not always the scientists that we attract. We're getting this certain type of person in our organization, right? Which is good, and it fuels our passion to do work. But we don't know about AI necessarily. So when all this came, when was it? It was almost like there was 1 week last year where everybody was talking about AI. I don't know if you remember that, like last spring. The buzz word. And so we created we use Slack to communicate. So we created a Slack channel, and we were all just reading everything we could about AI. And I mean, in all aspects of our business. So donations, how can we use AI to increase our donations? Because we want to help more people. How can we use AI to grow our social media platforms? Because more people that see our stuff, the more, so we were looking at all these tools. And then, recently the study that came out of Sweden that showed that the AI actually, I mean, I don't know how else to say it, but it was almost better the AI group was better at reading mammograms than to radiologists. That's I don't know if that's controversial to say, but that's what the study said. And did you read that study? It was out of Sweden.
I did. Yeah. I think people have kind of hyper reflexive opinions on AI, right? And basically it's just, in some way, and maybe somebody would disagree, but AI is a combination of not just 10, 20, 100, or 1,000 radiologists, but it's taking, 10,000 radiologists that read only mammograms and breast, and just like you want someone that's experienced or has been doing this a long time or whatever, putting it all together and then being the aggregate of that mind, right? Of all those minds combined. And it's able to learn at a precision, whereas, our eyeballs can appreciate, a little obscure kind of border on a calcification in a mammogram to some degree, and millimeters to some degree, even with our measuring tools. But when radiologists use measuring tools and kind of justify their conclusions, AI can do that, but at a logarithmic level of everybody combined. And I think that's where, these are, again, not replacements for things at all, but they're ways to then, in this example, as a foundation, you're financing, to help people with something that was deemed scary or needed more investigation. And there is a percentage of those mammograms that maybe, if they fell on someone else's eyeballs, right, that it was like in fact benign and actually not concerning, but a repeat in 3 to 6 months rather than the MRI and biopsy.
Right.
That's variability, right? That's the person that's reading that mammogram. So one, it could help the angst and unnecessary, imaging and biopsies. But two, it can really help kind of preserve the funding and the foundations and the costs that go into the healthcare system as a whole, across everything, cancer and not, but also to the aid, and really have a higher yield of what provokes the anxiety and that really, challenging time for a family. And number two, what is necessary or needed or not needed. So, I think I find that interesting, and I'm not exactly sure where the resistance for that comes from, other than maybe the presumption that means that everything has to be by a non-doctor brain. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm really interested in more studies. I mean, I was done in Sweden. We need to do it here, right? And I think one of the other things was they weren't tracking race or ethnicity, which is important. But one of the things that stuck out to me from that were the time that it could potentially save. And you kind of alluded to that. And it was very clear. It's not going to be a replacement. It's going to be a tool. And I think that's how we have to look at it. It's a tool. Like at some point, right, in our history, we didn't have a screwdriver, a wrench, or a hammer. And then at one point we did, and somebody was probably mad because they're like, no, I use this rock to hammer this thing. It works really well. And that I'm really good at making these rocks. I'm just making, I don't know
No, it makes sense.
Prehistoric history, but at some point, all these tools that we use, there was probably hesitancy, and somebody didn't want to do it. But I think we have to embrace technology. We are looking at how we can use it as a tool in everything that we do. I'm not going to tell you the name of the country, but I was in a country a few years back. Again, I'm not a doctor, but I love to learn, and but I was with
I can tell all the books behind you.
Yeah, and I brought this. I saw that you like you follow this
Emperor of All Maladies.
Yeah. I saw that on one of your podcasts. But I was in a country and we were looking at ways that we could help this population find breast cancers early, which is going to sound crazy when I say the rest of what I'm about to say, but in that country, they had one radiologist for the entire country. And they had a state hospital with one mammography machine that was apparently, I don't know all the details about it, was built a few decades earlier and was refurbished to look like it was a GE machine. And it wasn't plugged in. And like literally, I walk in and it's like not even connected. I think the point of what I'm saying is I think there's a lot of here in the United States where we have all these resources, it's easy to have these arguments. But what if I'm like, can we get AI immediately in these countries where there's one radiologist, like tomorrow? Right now. And then can we build the infrastructure to get screening and mammograms, and so that people aren't having to show their tumors to their doctor? That's kind of how I think about it. But also in the United States, we have a shortage of radiologists. We have long wait times, despite what we think. And so I think it could be used as a tool, and I think we should embrace. And then if it's better, we should embrace it. I think. What do you think? You're a doctor.
No, I mean, I think that it helps facilitate a lot of things on an already over-exhausted, system. Like it takes forever to get your imaging. It takes forever to get your biopsy, get the results. So if the number of things that are causing the taking forever were reduced, then maybe it would take less forever, right? So I think anything that expedites that is better. So do you have any? I'm very curious. I'm sure you have some stories of ways that someone's, passion for cancer or wanting to support somebody in a difficult situation really was magical. Do you have some of those stories to share on how, every cancer community is very close and tight knit, but and everyone's unique, but uniquely in breast cancer, there's just such a tight sense of, I think, identity and I don't know, companionship. So what are some of those stories, if you have any?
I mean, I could go on and on, so many stories. I mean, one of the programs I'm most proud of right now that we're doing, we about a decade or so ago, that same nurse navigator, professor at Johns Hopkins, Lillian Shockman, started what's called the metastatic retreat. And what she does is she brings in about 12 patients, and they go to a retreat facility for the weekend, and they bring their caregivers. So she'll have one with the husbands, and then if a patient's not married, they can bring a female caregiver, like sister or spouse or whatever. And every single retreat, we hear these just insane stories. It was one where a patient came, she was stage 4, probably less than a year to live, but she was healthy enough to go to the retreat. They travel, we pay for everything. So they get there, they don't have to pay for anything. And the whole point of the retreat is your time is limited, right? There's no cure. So what are your hopes for the rest of your time, and what are your fears? If for that patient, she had a 4-year-old daughter, if she said, my hope is I want to see my child graduate. Well, we got to get that in line. Anyways, as the conversation started with this particular patient, and this story's been told by Lily a few times, but this patient actually didn't have anywhere for her daughter to go. She had no family. And so when that question was asked, she said, well, I guess I'll just put her in foster. Well, her female caregiver was right there, and she started crying. And she was upset, and, they pulled them aside and say, what's going on? And she said, well, I've always wanted to take her daughter. I'm her caregiver. I've always wanted to take her daughter. The patient was pulled aside, like, what's going on? Well, I don't want to ask her because she's taken care of me all these years. I don't want to put this burden on her. They had never had the conversation. They had never had this conversation. So at this retreat, they talk through everything. This caregiver says, I want to take her daughter. I want to adopt her. I want her to be mine. The patient said, I want her to adopt. I want her to take my child. They bring them back together. They talk it through. They make a plan. Patient dies 4 months later. The girl is adopted. We had a patient at one who came in and said she was HER2 positive, had never heard of Herceptin. She was in a rural setting I don't know how that happened. That might have been like,
no, these are things that destroy me. They still happen. Yeah.
This might have been years ago, but she was like, what's Herceptin? And wasn't on it, and went from probably months to live to maybe extending by years.
It's catastrophically different with trastuzumab. If you have what is traditionally a pretty aggressive, receptor or two, and then, the reason it flipped on survival is purely because we were found a way to neutralize the very aggressive property, that HER2 is.
Well,
so those are the things that really bother me. And also, just either to some degree guilt and shame because I'm part of the healthcare system, but also, understanding that there is stuff to be done and could be done better. And then ultimately why we do this, right? The podcast, the social media, it's it may seem fun or even self-serving, but it's at the end of the day, if it was all taken away, it'd be I hope, we hope that people were helped, right? And that's the whole, if it ever becomes anything beyond that, then it's in vain and you're a parasite in the world. But if you're going to help something that has this gaping hole, is the equity of care.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the fact that it has to be, that's what blows my mind. In 2023, in a multi-billion-dollar industry, why the social media and its videos, how can that influence getting someone to standardize, optimal care guidelines today? That's what is very distressing. What are some of the things that can be done to y'all's foundation or anything you've seen to make sure that kind of equity, where things are just severely, there's a big deficit, not enough oncologists or not enough whatever, people are coming in and out. What are some of the things that you found or know of that can help to kind of equalize to make sure where you live doesn't dictate how you do with a diagnosis?
Well, and I would love to get your thoughts on this too, again. But I do think patient navigation helps. We fund.
Huge.
Yeah, we have about close to 30 patient navigator programs that we fund. So we've been doing that for over a decade. we've actually been funding navigation
That's huge.
long time in hospitals that now one of the struggles we're having with right now is a lot of these these like small little hospitals that we're doing this great navigation work to bring equity are getting bought up. Right? Okay, I'll be quiet. But, so that's tricky too now. But I think for us, one of the things that we just launched in this October is our Spanish initiative. And so we are working really hard to translate as much material as we can into Spanish, to outreach. We're partnering with Univision, the television network. We have a wonderful team that's working on that. I don't speak Spanish, so I'm not on the team, but they are really targeting women who may not have access, who may be undocumented, but they're working here, right? And how can we screen them? Because it's in everybody's best interest to find breast cancer early, right?
Yeah.
Treat it early in the earliest stage, not when they're showing up in the ER. So we are doing everything we can to make people feel comfortable to go to their hospital. I'm not going to butcher the words, I won't say, but it basically says 1 in 8, and the whole concept of the initiative is put yourself first. You take care of your children, you do all of these things, you go to work, you're a mother, you put your children first. We've heard stories where people have saved up money for a mammogram and they got the cash or whatever, and then their kid needed a new basketball shoe. They took the money out, went and bought new, things like that. So we are encouraging Hispanic women to put themselves first, to go get screened, and that it's safe and it's okay. And there's hospitals. There's hospital here in Dallas County, Parkland Hospital, that will get you all the way through survivorship, from early detection through survivorship. They will take you in and they will take care of you. And we have navigators that we fund there that's their job, is to make sure that the wait time is similar to UT Southwestern, which is an NCI designated hospital.
Right.
So
that's incredible.
That's our message, and our goal is, put yourself, you matter, your life matters. We need you to be alive, Simple things like that can really make a big difference. We've been at events where we've talked to women who need to be screened, and they'll say things like, well, does my life even matter? We'll just see what happens. Fate will dictate what happens. No, your life does matter. And we don't want to rely on faith when we have all these tools that can keep you here with your children, so that that's what we believe in.
That's magical. I love that. It really helps mind and body both, what you're doing. So Doug, the golden ray from you is something that is very easy to appreciate. I have to ask you at the close of this, 2 things. If you could tell a patient any one thing, what would that be? And then if you're telling someone that's a non-patient, because of what you see and the needs still that exist in breast cancer and preventing and everything, what would that be and how would they differ?
I'm just going to say what first
from the heart.
My mind. Yeah, exactly. Well, our mission is hope. In BCF, our mission is hope. Our founder was diagnosed in 1981. She was 34 years old. She woke up and found out she had breast cancer from another surgery. She was like, okay, I'm going to die immediately. She's alive today. Just talked to her yesterday. She's amazing, full of energy, still leading our organization. Wonderful. I think stories like that are important to tell people, but our organization's always been infused with hope. And I'm not saying anything against anyone else, but a lot of times in cancer, you see those battle metaphors, and you got to be strong, and you got to be, you're going to fight this. You're going to be,
don't give up.
Yeah. Or F cancer or whatever. And that's fine. I think everybody has different personalities. When my mom was diagnosed, that was not her personality. She was very timid, and she was a nurse in Vietnam, but she was timid, and it broke her being in war. Anyway, some people need hope. They need hope. They need a message of hope. So that's what we do. We want to be a message of hope. We don't want to tell you to fight. we want to tell you that we're here for you. And I actually, if any of your listeners are there right now and they need help, or they need support and they feel alone, please try us out. Call us. We don't need a donation. We want to help you. We just want to help. And I think we can do it. We have so many different ways to help and so many ways to give people hope. And I think that some people need that. Some people need to say, I'm going to fight, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that.
That's beautiful. That's a very important message that I try to share too is, and I worry sometimes when there are these, random mentorship programs where everyone, maybe I'm naive, means well.
Yeah.
It's like you get matched with a survivor, and then, but it's okay that if something doesn't hit you, that way or the right way, it's okay if something doesn't feel right. Everyone has, 100 shades of what and how, but to keep exploring until you find that, because hope is so important. So I really appreciate you shooting from the heart, which I could feel on that one. And then for the person that's, listening that doesn't have cancer, but maybe is passionate about or enthusiastic about wanting to help or how to support, those that do have cancer because they've probably experienced it with a loved one, what's your message?
I mean, definitely go visit our website, mbcf.org. Of course, you can give, but we have other ways to support giving. I talked about the need for, I wish that we could do, I think every single person, we lose 40,000 women to breast cancer every year. I think 40,000 women should be able to go to a metastatic retreat and get those services. When our metastatic patients go to a retreat, they do a survey at the beginning and they say, what is your fear level? And usually it's about 8 or 9. When they walk away from that retreat, it's at a 2, 3, and 4. That's
incredible.
That means you can actually have the rest of your time and it could be enjoyable. You can live your life. We want to do that for everyone that's metastatic, and that's a challenge. So donating, volunteer. We have tons of volunteer opportunities. We have community ambassadors that outreach communities, so many different ways. So I would just say visit mbcf.org. We have a podcast as well. I want to have you on at some point if you're
hoping.
We'd love to have you as a guest. It's called Hope Ignited, and I think it's on all. I'm not in marketing, but it's on all of the podcast channels. And but yeah, they're just come to visit our site, and whether you're a patient or someone who wants to support a loved one, I feel like we have all the different angles where you can plug in and get involved.
In that example, where someone's anxiety and outlook on their diagnosis goes from an 8 or a 9 going into a retreat and a 2 to 3 on after a retreat, distilled down, in your opinion, what do you think was the thing that changed that level when the diagnosis didn't change? What made that drastic difference about the retreat? Any retreat?
You'd almost have to see it. But I think one very big thing that jumps out is being around other people that are going through the same thing as you.
So identity.
Yeah, that. Yes. Connecting with other people. Like, okay, you are all going down this road with me. Right. And I'm saying the same thing. You feel similar to me, this existential dread of like, what's going to happen? What was this whole thing about? And then then they introduce hospice and palliative care. We're big promoters of hospice and palliative care. I think there's a lot of fear behind that. We remove the fear of that. Like, you don't have to be afraid of hospice. Palliative care is not hospice, right? You think it is, that. You see patients and you almost don't want to tell them.
Right.
And then removing those fears. Also, we bring in oncologists to talk about updates. So there may even be clinical trials that they can get on. Then also we encourage them to do milestones. So one of the sessions that we do is a milestone session where they make cards for those milestones in their family. Like, if you have a child who's 4 and you're not going to see them graduate, but you can make a video or a card now and you can leave your legacy.
Oh, wow. That's heavy.
So we really focus on like, we don't say you're going to make it, but we say we can meet some of these hopes and these things that you want to do with the rest of your time.
You desensitize the uncomfortable.
At least
you just desensitize it. And I see that every day with a new diagnosis or patient with a new diagnosis, the diagnosis doesn't change, but someone can go from very scared and uncomfortable to not, to like laughing and happy the next week or the next month. And that's because there was a desensitization of something that was very scary. And, people ask, like, how do you do oncology? Isn't depressing? I'm like, dude, it's only humbling, because you see that 99.99, I'm going to say 100% of people, when they meet the discomfort, and I could never speak as if I am one of those, but I see it in the room. It's whether you call it divine, inherent, they just, I feel like people can overcome anything if they are afforded the opportunity to understand and meet it, head on, and get guidance to get that, to be able to meet it. Sometimes it takes handholding because it's uncharted waters. It's a dark room. But if somebody can help them get there and see what's there, I just have yet to see a patient that just doesn't that just doesn't valiantly take it. I mean, and that's what's humbling. Like I could never imagine myself having the strength that I see every day. And I think that's something so special and really is a big reason to foster any aid, whether emotional, financial, like stress or whatever, to those people, because they really are valiant, and it's just very humbling.
And it's in you too. It's in you too. It's in all.
Right? Not to that degree. I appreciate that.
But you've got to mine it. You've got to dig in and get it out.
Yeah. But yeah. No, that's 100% true. But I always say, as close as I am, like, if I've learned anything, is that I'll never really know, or I'll never feel comfortable speaking on what it's like, right? Like that's a binary thing, and it's just humbling, and I just can't imagine. Yeah, I don't know. It's very humbling.
Yes.
But, Doug, I appreciate you so much. This was awesome. You're clearly very passionate about what you do, and I certainly hope to be following up together, because you're doing a beautiful thing, and that retreat concept is one that I think I need to definitely, introduce or make sure that people are aware of, that you just kind of get in the company of people that may understand you better than even the most loving family members.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you see specifically breast cancer patients or not, but while we were on this call, I got an email, and we just got a new grant to fund more. We're probably going to fund about 10 or 15 more retreats. So
great.
If you are wanting to talk, like, maybe
try it out. Yeah, NBCF.
Yeah.
Awesome. Doug, thank you so much.
Thank you.